Snow.
Well, you know, we have that much cocaine lying around is easy to mix up with snow. Hey, we're on the air. Greetings. This is Princess Robot, episode 5, I believe. I called it "Don't Quit Your Day Job, Lucifer," because apparently we're going to be talking about music today. Because
Wow, nice.
this is Princess Robot podcast, so we can speak out loud about your
Yay.
doubts and fears, and what's more, no one ever disappears. You never hear their standard issue leaping out your door. You can relax on both
Wow.
sides of the tracks, and maniacs don't blow hose through bandsmen by remote control, and everyone has recourse to the law, and no one kills their children anymore. Wait, that's not it.
How long have you been waiting to whip that out, huh?
We don't even know when I whipped that out. If Floyd was around, he would be able to tell us. Today we're talking about music, I guess, which I'm extremely underqualified for, but thankfully we got the voice of an angel here. Isn't that right,
That's
Danny
kind of you.
Sexton? No, it's not. Oh, shit.
Yeah, would that be cool if we had Danny on here? Whoa. No,
we were talking about Graham Grumps before, a music podcast. Go figure.
Yeah. I really like Danny as a musician and a comedian. But let's see, I wanted to say something. Oh, I disagree with you that you're not, I think that you will have a lot to contribute here. You've told me about the music, or the way that you experience music, and I think that it's pretty unique. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah. I just wait till we have a movie podcast, and I'll be back on board.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Anyways, I think this is my idea, so I'll shut up. Anyways, we got about 8 people lying around. It's wintertime. Everyone's hibernating. That's fine.
It's great. It's more than I could ever hope for.
We didn't have Gamergate to track in the crowd, so this is going to be a little powwow. Huddle around and keep yourselves warm.
Yeah, it's wintertime. Just imagine... this is something completely different than music, kind of, but it's also something that I've wanted to say for a long time. Maybe I have said it. It's fascinating to me the way that the internet has skewed our ideas about like numbers of people, right? So when we think of 8 people, it feels like, it's nothing because we're used to seeing, I don't know, millions on YouTube videos and stuff like that. But really, I don't know how well your work is viewed on Film Fiction. Do you have any numbers off the top of your head of like how many people have viewed something or liked something of yours that you're proud of?
If a story makes the feature bar, it's probably going to have about 1.5 thousand hits.
1.5 thousand?
Yeah.
Sure. So in a way that might seem small to people. Especially when some other works of yours have had much, much, much more than that, right? But really, so the Sisters did pretty well. I think it had 2,000 or something thumbs up.
That's good. If you get the thumbs in the thousands, it's legendary status, basically.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
And so that feels kind of like my bar, I should be able to write stories that are that liked. It's how I feel. But The Daughter Do, which really is a sequel, if not a companion to that story, and so part of me feels like it should have the same amount of traction, only has, I think, 60 thumbs up, which seems like a lot less. And so I was a little bit sad about that. And then I was talking with my wife, Ash, about it, and she said, well, imagine 60 people in a room, Yeah. Imagine, and we were in a little restaurant, and she said, this restaurant can't even fit 60 people. And that was really pretty amazing to think of it that way. And even thinking about 8 or however many are joining us right now, if we were all together, that would be a very cozy, a very lovely little evening to spend time together. So thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to talk about music with you.
I must say that the lasting legacy of Australia and a lot of the other stuff that I write on a daily basis is that it kind of gathers a fairly small crowd, but they're very dedicated and they leave comments all the time. And I would rather have that than like the gazillions of people who read and did thumbs up to fucking hiccups. So thank you kindly, for that bullshit. All right. The Sound of Music. Forrest makes the comment that music is in all my fucking stories, and I guess yeah, that's true. Only, but that's a video game thing. I was influenced forever by Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. That the idea that like you can tie in music to magic, and also there's this weird ass moment in Final Crisis, which is a DC Comics thing, where Superman preserved all humanity in some sort of like thought machine that he was able to activate by just singing this giant musical note. But it was weird, obscure reference. Anyways,
weird.
I think hey, Props is here. Cool beans. You hopped
Hi,
out
Props.
to watch us. What I think is going to happen is that Ponky and I are going to do kind of a one-by-one exchange of our history with listening to music, like, you know, what we're into over time. Not getting too insanely detailed, but just so kind of our experiences and what it's meant for us and all that jazz. And then I have a top 5 artists and top 5 album, and then I think Ponky has something way more sophisticated.
Not way more.
I think so.
But yeah, I'm excited about sharing what we have with you all. I think you should go first. I really do, just because we can go back and forth if you'd like, but just the way that you talk about music and your experiences is pretty inspirational to me, and I think it'll give me a better idea for what I want to do. So
cool. I'll do my best.
Why don't you go ahead and get started?
The pot roast isn't agreeing with me, but whatever. In case it wasn't made obvious in a lot of my blogs and other like musing and hypothetical ramblings I've done in the past, I was raised in a very conservative environment, not freaking Amish or anything, but very Christian evangelist kind of a household where, you know, you're sure as fuck weren't going to be listening to Black Sabbath or Slayer or anything else like that. So almost all the music I ever got as a kid, and I'm talking like through age 10, 11, 12, was hand-me-downs from my parents. So early 80s memories of me was like, you know, listening to Amy Grant or like freaking what else? Maybe Michael W. Smith and other people at the time who were like 80s and 90s mainstays in like Christian positive radio music. That's just kind of what I inherited. And a lot of praise music as well from like churches and stuff like that. And as often as silly as it might sound, and how a lot of like cynics might like look back at something like that, I mean, I have positive childhood memories, you know, and a lot of the music which is objectively silly maybe compared to more free-form styles of like creative expression, I still have a nostalgia boner for, and the shit like
wow. Will you say that as a complete sentence, that you have a nostalgia boner for Christian music?
Yeah. Okay. Hello, I am Short Skirts and Explosions, and I have a nostalgia boner for Christian music.
Welcome, Short Skirts. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Sadly, your name is not in the Book of Life, so you're being cast into the lake of fire. Anyways, some of the earliest things I remember listening to was this a cappella group named Glad. I wrote to you about that before. Glad was like 5 or 6 dudes who would just sing like praise songs and stuff like in perfect harmony. There's a group that's really popular, Pentatonics, I think that's the closest thing to compare them to. And also in my childhood, Petra was a thing I listened to a lot. And Petra, I've included the name Petra into lots of forms of writing and stuff throughout like the whole My Little Pony fan fiction and stuff. Petra is named after...
Yeah, even more than that. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, anyways, the whole point, Petra was like a group that came into being in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, American group that... their entire like shtick was to more or less emulate what was popular at the time in mainstream music. So in the late 70s, they were basically emulating like Led Zeppelin, and then like in the 80s, they were kind of emulating AC/DC and stuff. So they kind of moved from like folk rock to like pretend pussy version of heavy metal, and then like in the 90s they became like alternative rock, and they lasted for almost 30 years. The band's completely changed. The name and the purpose of Petra was more important than I think the identity, because they were trying to be like a ministry in addition to providing like the Christian culture, like a Christian alternative to what was popular at the time. And you know, as goofy as it sounds, they actually had some nice melodies and nice like thrash to some of their instrumentals and stuff. I think they were actually pretty good. But you know, by legit like metal fan standards, they're just, you know, laughable. But it struck a chord with me. And I remember like the first time I ever started doing like fan fiction writing, like really serious, like first time I started drinking Dr. Pepper heavily, like in 98, 99, I was listening to Petra nonstop. It was like my mantra for like for like just doing like a writing session. It's like the first writing music I ever listened to. So there's that. But I also was sort of inundated with more secular stuff that I guess my parents thought was like, this won't turn him to Satan. And that was like Simon and Garfunkel
Yeah.
and the Moody Blues, stuff from like the 60s, moving on into the 70s. And Simon and Garfunkel especially became like sort of like a soundtrack to some of my childhood, which is great because it was music that my father listened to when he was a kid in the 60s, you know. My father being born in 52, so he would have been a right age to listen to stuff from like Simon and Garfunkel, The Who, and that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
My father was like in my mother was in her young adolescence and teenagehood in like the early 70s, so she was alive during a really good time in music, and so I was able to inherit some of that as I grew up. And then in middle school, I was exposed to the Beatles. I finally got into them, and that became like the soundtrack of my puberty. But it wasn't until, wasn't really until high school. Sadly enough, I mean, it's a little embarrassing, but it wasn't until like I was in 10th or 11th, 12th grade that I started actually branching out and listening to my own music. And the first like the mold break of that.
You mean like independent of what your
Yes,
parents would
thank
share?
you. Independent of stuff that's hand me downs, listening to things that was either relevant or was considered too secular for me to be allowed to listen to beforehand. And the mold break of that was Pink Floyd. First time I heard Pink Floyd was in a high school class, movie class. That they played it to the Dark Side of the Moon. They played to Wizard of Oz. I'm sure you heard about that, where like on the third roar of the lion at the opening of Wizard of Oz, you play Dark Side of the Moon, and it syncs up. Like the music actually syncs up with the actions of the film. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never experienced it, but yeah.
I've experienced it, and it's pretty legit. Like when it hits Time, which is like Time and Great Gig in the Sky, which is one of the best fucking moments of that album. It's like the moment where Dorothy is in the tornado and like spinning around. You hear like the orgasmic screaming and stuff. And when she opens the door into Munchkin Land is where Money starts with the cash machine, with the cash register machine sound. Is like perfect. So I was like, God, this sounds weird and creepy. I love it. So I at the time, I won't mention his name on the podcast, but a friend of mine, I knew that his father like was really into Pink Floyd. Like, can I borrow some of those CDs? Like, yeah, but remember he's had these CDs since like '91. Don't fuck them up. All right, and that's how I was able to listen to stuff like Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, The Wall, and that kind of got me out of like the conservative muck, so to speak. And I had friends of mine telling me, hey, you like Pink Floyd? You want something modern that's like them, but even cooler? Listen to Radiohead. I'm like, okay. And then that became a journey. And Radiohead was sort of like my go-to, like, I listen to Radiohead. This is my identity, you know, in like the late 90s. And then I kind of started finally watching like VH1 and MTV in like 2000, 2001. And I was getting more familiar with like pop music at the time. I didn't really like a lot of it, but it sort of became like the, something I was finally being able to identify, and
Mm.
it's like, so who's this Madonna person? It's like, dude, that's like 15 years old. Like, oh, okay. Shit like that happening that I went through a phase in because I used to work at a Christian bookstore where I would listen to techno music. I want to listen to techno music, and all they had was like Christian techno. It's like, what the fuck is Christian techno? It's like, well, it's so obscure that it's actually kind of cool in a weird way because like no one listened to it, but it has nothing on like any like the major like dance tracks things at the time. But finally got into in college years, listening, got exposed to more indie stuff, and I kind of just started getting eclectic and listening to things all over the place. And finally, in the age of the internet, I guess you can say I've kind of come full circle to not really having a lot of musical exposure, because when you have something like YouTube or you have all these other kind of digital devices, you kind of grab music from everywhere. So when I sit down and I'm like, I'm going to be writing, I want to listen to music, I don't really think like I'm going to put on this album by this group, or I'm going to listen to this particular decade of music. It's like I am in the mood for either ambient shit, I'm just going to throw on the background, or I'm going to put on like this compilation of music that all fits in the same theme that someone put together in a montage for people to to click on and listen to randomly online. And lately, my go-to theme of music is pretty much like I want to say like 80s synth wave or 80s synth pop. It's stuff that sort of recreates the sound of the 80s, but is brand new music using that kind of like synthesizer, electronic synthesizer sound.
Cool.
I mean, it's like the soundtrack of Thor Ragnarok that we're talking about before the podcast. That would be an example.
Yeah, that was
Or
fantastic.
anything from like Hotline Miami or like the Mass Effect soundtrack. I really like synthwave stuff from Anorak or College. Pretty much any of the songs they put on the things Tavi says. I think I've told you about like, hey, read the things Tavi says, Punky. Fuck you, skirts.
I've never said that.
just kidding. Preface every chapter with like a link to a YouTube song that I liked, and I try to keep it all themed. And so it was a lot of vaporwave, a lot of synthwave, a lot of sort of modern, retro, nostalgic pop sounding music that's very electronically driven. That's like my favorite kind of thing right now.
That's cool.
If someone was to say, "What's your favorite genre of music?" I'd say synthwave. And then I find myself listening to a lot of kind of ambient music, and then also if I feel like I really want to get in a happy mood, I'll listen to like weird shit like 16-bit Sound Blaster 16 music from MS-DOS, the weird little compilations that kind of get me in a nostalgic mood. Because ultimately, when it comes to music, what music does for me is usually puts me in a nostalgic mood for a time in my life, or a mood I was in, or a creative period that I had, which is why like when I did the blog almost a year ago at this point about 2011, I threw in so many links to YouTube videos just as a reference to the music I'd listened to at the time and how it influenced me when I was doing like early Into Ponies writing and other stories at the time, because that's just it was like the last time I ever listened to any music that thematically affected me was 2011. Since then, I mean, 2012, I can identify some of the stuff I listened to, and especially 2013, while you're away on the mission, I listened to a lot of an album that you're probably going to mention, so I won't spoil it. And I listened to other stuff as well, just to kind of fill in the gaps. And so when I hear that same music again, I think about how melancholic 2013 was, but we won't go into that too much.
That is interesting, though.
Yeah,
and I think that's exactly what I meant when I said that the way that you talk about music is unique. And maybe this is normal. Maybe a lot of people experience music the way that you do. Mm-hmm. For me, music is very rarely, if ever, nostalgic. It doesn't. take me to a time so much as it focuses me on the music right now. So I don't know if that's something weird about me. I don't know if that is also, I don't know. It's fascinating. But you're certainly not the first person ever who I've met who associated music with certain time periods in their life. But every time that I've met somebody like that, it's just mind-blowing to me because I don't understand it. I certainly don't experience it that way. So,
well, this might be one. I mean, this maybe I'm rambling a bit about it, but you kind of came into age discovering the internet, so to speak, right? I mean, when you hit like age 19, 18, 19-ish or something, you kind of discover the internet, and like I would imagine that at your age you probably had more digital access than I did. When I was like 19, I was just, I mean, Napster was kind of just becoming a thing. If I wanted to listen to music, I either had to go out and buy a CD, or I had to go on something like fucking Kazaa and like download it and corrupt my computer to hell. I couldn't just go on YouTube and like, oh, here's a clip of from The Wall, Pink Floyd. So you had to put more effort into compiling music, and usually for me it was like I got a CD player with a cassette track on it. I'll actually make a cassette mix ripping off a CD. That's how backwards I've been. So you had to put a lot more effort into remembering things instead of having everything available to you at a click of a button. I'm not trying to sound like a old guy whippersnapper thing, but I think there's that old what is it? Maybe I'm getting my wires crossed, but I think there's like an old Greek myth thing where like there's like someone's trying to invent writing, and they say, and that's a bad idea because as soon as you write stuff, you don't have to remember things anymore because you're going to have it written down, and you don't want to be stupid.
right.
So,
yeah, that is very interesting. And in a lot of ways, that's getting worse, and I think everybody can see that the availability of information in our pockets and our computers makes it meaningless, or not meaningless, definitely not meaningless. That's not the word I mean. Well, it makes it easy to ignore, easy not to memorize things. You know, like what's the point?
And the irony is that you have all the devices at your disposal to make the best possible archive you can.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I was getting at, is that it seems so backwards because we finally have the opportunity to learn whatever we want, but instead of learning it, we just glimpse it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of sad.
When I was in high school, I had a lot of time between classes, before classes, after classes, kind of like you did at your bank job, just to be freaking bored out of my fucking skull. And so what I would do to pass the time is I would make lists, and I would have lists of top favorite movies, top favorite shows, top favorite songs. So I used to think a lot about my top favorite everything and be nostalgic for stuff. And when I would experience something like I did in maybe early 99 or was it late 98, we're like, oh, I've had such a buzz this week with like these things combined. I'm gonna call this an era of my life that I can think back to, you know. As time goes by, you get less and less of that because everything kind of just blurs together.
Right.
So your mentality is more aligned to the type of mentality I have now, but that's also because I feel like I've gotten fatigued from growing into the information age and like all the stuff that's accessible. But you did that like really quick because that's when
I guess so.
Age. I didn't always have the luxury of the instant information that we have now, so I had to sort of compile it on my own and kind of wish for the days that I could sit on my ass and get fat to be in front of YouTube.
And I think that's so interesting. I really do. And I've noticed this about you even before you put it into words like that, but you have spent a lot of time considering yourself, considering what you like and why you like it. You know what I mean? So like I always feel like that's really a really interesting part of you, is that you're very aware of your favorite things. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. I didn't know that it came from a very intentional time where you would make lists and things like that out of boredom. That's interesting.
If you want to make the solipsist argument, all you ever have to compile is everything you know about yourself. So, you know,
Interesting.
it also comes from not being very social, but I feel like you can relate to that as well.
Definitely, I was going to say that. Yeah, I can. That makes the most sense to me of any of it.
Oh God, it's snowing in Utah.
Another interesting part of that, or maybe a connection, or maybe thinking about music leads to a lot of different ideas in my head. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to narrow music down to one idea or one concept because it seems to be tied to so many things. And I'm fascinated by what it is tied to for other people. So for you and for many others, it's memories. Mm-hmm. Of course, I have some of that. It's a sense, and it tied itself to a lot of memories in my head. But more than memories, music makes me think of like, I guess it paints pictures in my head. It gives me these images, scenes, you know, of what's happening in the song, or what could be happening while the song is playing.
I think I know where this is going.
Like in a movie or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean
about that to me. Yeah, but I won't spoil it.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's funny that you thought of that because I wasn't even thinking about it. But what he's referring to, everyone, is a literal like play or a movie maybe or something, some sort of story, very physical, visual story that I have seen in my head every time I listen to a particular album. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens to me a lot So I'm going to give, similar to what you did, just a brief history of my experiences with music.
Do it.
I don't remember ever being like aware of how interesting music was to me.
Did you have a conservative Christian upbringing, Punky?
I had a conservative Christian upbringing, but it was not.
Yeah, it's not
like musical. That. No, not at all. Mormonism does not have praise music or like that. I didn't know anything about that kind of music, that Christian pop sounding stuff, until I was 16 years old. Like I had never heard that. It never occurred to me, because Mormonism, or at least the brand of Mormonism that my mom flaunted, is very reverent. Music is all about reverence and bringing the spirit, and you know, these ideas of maintaining peace or bringing to mind meditation and just Jesus. And like when you start bringing instruments or good singers into the mix, then it becomes more selfish or more about the band and the group than it does about God.
Sixpence none the richer. Oops.
So Mormonism, as far as I can tell, you know, in my version of Mormon culture that I was surrounded with my entire life, there's none of that. There's EFY music, I guess, which is kind of similar, but I always hated that stuff, and it never was an important. EFY stands for especially for youth, and it's a Mormon.
Okay.
I don't know much about it because it was never part of my life, but I know that some people value it a lot. It's a Mormon camp for kids that happens all over the United States.
Sorry.
Wow, that got me.
Okay.
It's very weird. You guys can look up EFY if you want to. It's this weird Mormon camp, and it's stupid, and there's a lot of that dumb pop music. It's so cheesy, and I think that's what I've always hated about Christian music, is that it's so overwhelmingly campy. It's never creative.
Well, I would argue that there is creative Christian music out there.
I shouldn't say never. Sure, absolutely. I should not say never. It's stereotypically, it's not very creative.
Yeah. So the stuff on the radio.
Sure,
like
exactly.
You're playing the same Michael W. Smith song from 15 fucking years ago. Way to go.
Exactly. Exactly. So I really don't like that stuff, and I never knew it. It was never part of my life. What was part of my life was the music. My mom was born in the early '70s and grew up with late '70s, early '80s music, and loves it. She loves it, and so that
Just like
I grew up with a lot of that. I heard a lot of stuff like Yaz and ABBA and
you would be into ABBA.
oh my gosh, I freaking love ABBA. And it's just because my mom did, you know, and I have all these great experiences of people that I was listening to it with being very happy. And so when I hear it, even though it is also cheesy and corny and campy, I actually was just talking to my mother-in-law about this the other day. I don't know exactly what it is that like makes things like the Carpenters, which is older, but anyway, the Carpenters and well, maybe it's not actually. I think it's anyway. Whatever. Who cares? Carpenters and ABBA and you know, what are some of the other ones? I can't even remember. I have a list somewhere. Not my top 5 list, but just a general list of songs that I have that are very old.
The interesting difference between your mom and mine is that my mother, when she got into when she met my father, it was not just like a romantic thing, it was also kind of spiritual thing. She had always kind of had a Christian upbringing, but when they came together, my father's like more deeply religious, so to speak. So kind of, I guess she sort of like got indoctrinated more into the Christian scene, if that makes a sense. So she felt the need, and this is her own personal choice, she felt the need to distance herself from what she considered was secular music at the time. And she was listening to shit like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and like Cream and a lot of other, you know, heavy legit like 70s rock. Like if she kept going, she probably ended up listening to the Slayer and Aerosmith and, you know, what have you. But she didn't. She pulled herself out of the music scene and kind of desecularized herself. So she kind of has that time capsule thing of like early to mid 70s music.
That is amazing.
That
is so interesting.
And for her, it's a nostalgic bomb to go back to that, but she has almost no recollection of anything from the 80s, because in the 80s, like, we are not having Michael Jackson in this household, or like, you know, David Bowie.
I love Michael Jackson.
That kind of stuff. There is a lot of things that we weren't exposed to because our parents were like, they were in the habit of boycotting stuff. Like we didn't go to Universal as a kid because Last Temptation of Christ was a Universal film, you know, that kind of stuff. So it sounds like
I never experienced anything like that.
Yeah, it sounds like with your mom, she had that. She didn't have to distance herself from that music. She had that positive stuff in her life, even though it had the secular source.
That's right.
Okay.
And I think that is pretty prevalent in Mormonism, that there isn't this idea that secularism is evil.
Right.
It's just like live in the world and not of the world kind of a thing, that you can very much be exposed to and be around and even like a lot of mainstream things without necessarily falling into sin. Except for a whole lot of things. So that isn't necessarily, you know, I would say it's even truer in certain parts. It's certainly less true in Utah. I'll just put it that way. Utah has a lot of weird ideas and traditions, but like up in Washington,
I kid. There's no Space Mexico.
No, you're not wrong. But
there is a Space Mexico.
There is, absolutely, yeah.
Oh God!
You never even got to that point in in the Book of Mormon.
I stopped at like Jesus having like a arm wrestle with the kids and.
Yeah, that part's great. I like when Tiancum beats Jesus in arm wrestling. Oh man, that was so obscure and unfunny.
Comes down to Titantron and the flames are erupting on either side. And creatures of the night.
Oh man, that would be so cool. I want to start a religion like that.
Let's have a wrestling podcast. Okay, go on.
Oh boy, no. You can do that with somebody else. So I was exposed to a lot of music of their generation kind of first, I would say. You know, my dad has great taste in music, but I spent more time with my mom. And so I heard a lot of that really fun pop. Some of my favorite songs are like, oh man, I'll have to, I feel bad not remembering the names of the artists, But stuff like oh my gosh, you know those moments where you know those moments where there are so many songs in your head that you can't grab one. I don't know if you've ever had that. It's like a storm of songs, and I can't hold on to one for long enough to start singing it. But stuff like I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking of the right words to say. I know they don't sound the way I planned them to be, but if you wait around a while, I'll make you fall for me. I promise you. I promise you. That's the promise.
Okay. For example, and here's a fucking
songs
like
in that,
American
that
Idol rehearsal.
I mentioned Yaz, the Yaz song that I love that I was introduced to by my mother.
It sounds like Broadway style, kind of like.
Oh yeah, kind of. It's like Broadway pop. I mean, and that was the style. It was very dramatic in the 80s, you know. Looking from the window above, it's like a story of love. Can you hear me? Freaking love that song. That song means so much to me. And when you listen to it just objectively, it's very corny. But for some reason, it isn't in my head. And maybe it's just because when I loved it and when I listened to it a lot as a kid, similar to what you're saying about the value that you find in that Christian music that you liked, even though you can admit that it's silly.
It's part of your heart. Part of your chest vacuole.
Yeah, it's part of your heart. It's part of your first experiences with loving music. So that kind of stuff means a lot to me. There was this one mixtape, or I guess it was a CD. Mm-hmm. There was this one CD that my dad burned, and I thought it was music from their day. I thought that it was music from you know the 70s and 80s, but it ended up being very contemporary stuff.
You just didn't know at the time.
I just didn't know it at the time, and so I always think that these songs are older than they are. One of them, hilariously enough, is Smash Mouth.
Oh boy, okay.
And that's so funny to me because, and it's a lot of Smash Mouth songs too, not just.
I thought you said your father has good taste in music.
Yeah, I know. I thought so. He sure does now. I don't know what happened back then.
Oh, I'm trying to imagine like this like Tarantino moment where you kick down the door and your father turns around this easy chair and is like, "I thought you were into good music."
That's great. I've never asked my parents about this CD. It was called the Trip to St. George CD. Like that's what was written in marker on it. Because we often went down to St. George, which is a city in southern Utah, to visit my grandma there. And it was a long drive, several hours. So we would always have our little stupid VHS TV combo that could fit in the car, where the screen was as big as the end piece of a loaf of bread, and it was ridiculous. And we would watch The Little Mermaid 800 times in a row. And then we would also listen to this one CD, and we would listen to it over and over and over. And so a lot of those songs, 99 Red Balloons.
That's nice. That's good.
Lots of different Smash Mouth songs, one of which was I Can't Get Enough of You, Baby, which was like a cover, you know, of an older song, but I know the Smash Mouth version. But anyway.
Dude, when you make it big and you make your first album, you have to make it A Trip to St. George as a title.
Oh, that's cute. That's a good idea. I've never thought about that.
That'd be fucking or going to St. George with Benji or something. Yeah,
right. Yeah, Trip to St. George would be really cute. That's a nice idea.
Write that shit down.
Yeah.
And funny you say that because I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, you're fine.
Maybe I didn't clarify earlier, but like the hand-me-downs is music. My father technically is disabled, so he was not the breadwinner. Throughout most of my young life, he was basically the homemaker. So when I was a kid, I was basically hanging out with him all the time. So he had to run errands. I'd be riding with him. You ever had the stories of like, as a kid, I hung out with my mom all the time. For me, as my father, and so my memories of listening to music is hang out with him, drive around a Volkswagen van again from like '82, and listening to all sorts of stuff on cassette, including like Glad Acapella and Petra and stuff. So kind of similar to you and like the mixtape that your father had, but my memories are so old that we couldn't afford a mixtape. It was
Right.
just like whatever we bought from the store and put on cassette. But go on.
That's so fun. It's fun to think about where music comes from. And I've meant to talk to my parents about that CD for a long time. I don't think they will remember it because it wasn't important to them.
But it's important to you.
Exactly. So that's so interesting that I think that's why I halt myself from asking them about it, because I don't want to be disappointed. But one day I will.
You got to find it and or try to recreate that mix or something.
Oh, it'd be fun. It's hard to remember all of the songs that were on it, but I really enjoyed a lot of those. And then it all gets hazy though. Like so I have those very clear memories of kind of first music experiences and why those came. After that, I don't really remember caring very much about music until many years later. So I didn't ever have music that I would listen to for fun as a kid. I would rather do a lot of other things. Music didn't feel very important to me, which is so interesting now because I value music a lot. But I remember listening to lots of musicals, to Phantom of the Opera, Into the Woods. Those were very important.
You into show tunes? No way.
Well, funny enough, I'm not really into show tunes, not in the way that some people are, but I know a lot of them just because I was exposed to them, and little did I know. Here's the thing, Skirts and everyone.
Yeah.
I never understood, I never thought that music was unique, So one thing that Mormonism does do is that kids have their own little part in church. Church is 3 hours long every Sunday. And for 2 of those hours, everyone is in different meetings based on age, gender, and all kinds of things. So kids all go to primary. And in primary, you sing a lot of music. It's one of the main things that you do.
Okay.
And so I was singing songs, learning new songs, performing songs in front of people since I was 4 years old. And so was everyone else around me. It never occurred to me that not everyone in the world grew up like that. You just don't think about it when you're a kid. So I never knew that singing well, that memorizing songs, that hitting the right notes was unusual, was special. It never occurred to me till I was 13 and someone told me, you're a good singer. That before that, I had no idea. My mom never told me, like no one ever encouraged me and said, hey, you're good, until my middle school choir teacher pulled me aside and said, I'd like you to sing the solo. And I said, why? And she said, because you're good. And that was like mind blowing to me. I had no idea. And after that, obviously my life changed a lot, and I started to pay attention to music and listen to music. Well, not even just listen to music with new ears, but realize how much I had always listened to music.
Very interesting.
And how, so suddenly I realized that the things that I heard, other people weren't hearing. They didn't care about the bass line or, the little thing that Ringo Starr did in the background right there. They didn't even hear it. They didn't realize that there was a counter melody going on in the middle of this song, and how beautiful the harmonies are here compared to here because he goes above her instead of below her. Like people don't listen to that. And that had always been the most important part of music to me, were the little things that were happening that made it interesting and exciting.
Yeah, it's like the reason you sing like you mean it is because for so long you're singing it without meaning it.
I guess so. Yeah. It was just so natural. I had no idea that it was different. So as soon as I did, I just kicked it into 12th gear and just really focused on honing these skills that I realized were just kind of natural. So I started learning the songs that I was listening to. I had a lot of help in my early high school years with people who were very good at piano and singing, who noticed that I was excited about those kinds of things and took the time to teach me a little bit more. So that was a lot of fun. Someone taught me about chords on the piano, and I had taken piano lessons as a kid but hated it. And then as soon as I was taught about chord progressions and how simple it is and how it all fits together in a different way than just reading notes off of a page, I was very excited and I caught on very quickly, and I began to just go home every day and spend hours and hours and hours listening to new music or music that I already knew and loved and figuring out the chords. And so that was a very important time. It's hard for me to remember the music that I used because the more important part was just transcribing it, was figuring out how do I get it from sounding like this in my ears to this with my hands. And that was a lot of fun. But again, I don't really know that there were any particular groups or songs or anything that I really loved. There were some that my friends like gave to me, but they're all really stupid. And like, I didn't keep liking them. I just, they were important to me for a flash because someone else liked them. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of hard to explain, but that is my experience with music in before the end of high school.
So much of your experience is hands-on instead of just ears-on.
Yeah. It mattered so much more to me that I could do it rather than I could listen to it.
I cannot read sheet music. Some people, you know, a lot of commenters on film fiction, probably right after smoking a joint, go like, man, Skirts, how do you know so much about music? I fucking don't. I don't know anything about music. That's why I'm able to write so nebulously about it, is because for me, it's just a feeling. It's not an actual mechanic. It's not an actual instrument. Because I think, you know, I was one of those like saps in like elementary school where they said, hey, we're going to teach you band, kinda, and they give you like a recorder and like, go learn Mary Has a Little Lamb, play it once, and hey, you just did your band, you know.
Right.
I never had any inclination whatsoever that I wanted to be a musical performer. I would occasionally write like stupid attempts at poetry. I'm like, oh, I can do lyrics. No, you can't. You can't do shit. It's for me, music is, you know, it's Greek, and it's Greek to me. I don't know anything about actually composing it, doing it, so I just enjoy it as a consumer. But having to be in there,
you do that very well. Yeah, you enjoy it very well, and that's evidenced in things like Background Pony and
right.
Probably things Tavi says, where the way that you talk about music is so beautiful and so relatable. It's part of the reason Background Pony, I think, was so successful, is because the way that Lyra talked about music was so real. And I remember asking you, like, do you have the songs in your head? And you were like, no, of course not. I don't.
But then you started playing Ocarina of Time. You're like, oh, the Bolero, okay.
Yeah. That was so funny.
Okay.
I forgot about that. Yeah, as I started realizing how influential that was. But it was. Yeah. That was so surprising to me the first time that I found out in the first couple of messages back and forth when we very first met, that you were not a musician, because the way that you wrote about music, the way that you write about music is so genuine. So I think that shows through in a way that I can't really talk about music like that because it's so technical to me.
Yeah, if you're a musician and I'm writing shit that's like complimenting musicians and music in general, you probably read into it saying, "Oh, he knows so much about my craft." It's like, I'm giving you a hand job, but it doesn't mean I know anything about the dick. I mean,
great example. Thank you for that insight, Skirts. Love that. So I'll finish up quick with a very simple story, because what we really want to talk about is favorite music, not necessarily history of music. But I've talked about this before in places. What happened was I was learning a little bit here and there. People were helping me understand. I was getting really excited about the fact that I could hear things in music that other people didn't hear. And then I saw Bo Stevenson perform, and I was like, holy crap, that's exactly what I want to do. Is I want to sit at a piano in front of a crowd and sing a song with no music in front of me, no plan, just going crazy because I know the song so well. Such a remarkable idea, such a novel idea. I never thought about it, that music could be like that before. And it was so much fun. And so that's what I started doing. I started trying to be like Bo Stevenson, who later became a very good friend of mine, and we've done some Kai tunes together, and lots of things. But that might be something that people here have seen. So he mixes most of my music, not the most recent stuff, but like Petrified recently was recorded and mixed by him. My EP that I did a couple of years ago.
Do you still have to go across country to like hang out with him?
Yeah, he lives in California, so when I do get to see him, it's just very briefly when I head down to Los Angeles. Haven't done that for a long time. But we talk often. He just called me the other day. But now I write music. I love listening to good music. And Skirts, why don't you give us your top 5, and then I can share mine, which mostly all of this happened at the end of high school and beginning of college for me.
It's probably worth stating that since you're so creatively invested in music right now, you have a Patreon for that. And where can you find that Patreon?
That's right. Yeah, patreon.com/Kai Burton, KYBURTON.
For those of you,
I think a lot of people listening, actually, I think a lot of people that are listening right now do support me on there. So the people that I'm seeing in the comments. So thank you guys so much. It's amazing. I didn't really think it would work or that anything would come of it, and already it's been a huge motivation. I'm working on 3 songs right now that will come out this month, so I'm super excited to share those with you.
I know it was a commission and a cover, but the "Oh Lord" thing was really fucking fantastic for something you just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just gotta say, like the harmonies he did on that, like holy shit, this took a while to do, and it was a Patreon reward. So hey, get on that shit if you want really good covers by our sexy angel honey voice here.
That's sweet of you. No, thanks to everybody that's already doing that. You guys are amazing. It makes me teary every time I see a new person hopping on. So, thank you.
You get someone like contributing $25. It's like, what do you want to cover by? Lords of Acid. Oh shit.
Yeah.
You want to hear the punky cover? I want to fuck you like an animal.
That would be really interesting. Yeah. It'd be very different. I'd turn it into a soft piano ballad.
I want to feel you on
You know, that's actually not a bad idea.
Oh, the fucking Christ. Okay. So what am I doing? The artist? I want to do the artist first. So I don't have something nearly as awesome as Ponky, so I'm doing a top 5 favorite artists. The top 5 favorite artists of Short Skirt Sitting. Oh, you're a fucking Christ. Number 5, we have the Arcade Fire, the second best Canadians after Zeppinator. It's just the last 3 albums that they've done, I bled to death. Even if the latest one isn't the best, everything now, it still has some really good spots on it. And of course, Orpheus. No, I have the song of it. The one, oh god, I just getting my asshole blown out in stream. But basically, Arcade Fire, good stuff. They put a shit ton of like layers on their music when they do the editing, but I really like it, and they actually try to potentially speak to more than just like entertaining your ear balls. They actually like have a lot of meaning behind their lyrics and stuff, and I really dig them. Number 4 would be the Beatles.
Hold on. Oh, what? Great, that's great. I want to hear about that. But first, I only know one Arcade Fire song. I actually, like, I've listened to, is it called Suburbs? Is that
we're going to get to that later.
Yeah, I've listened to that whole album, but I don't know it very well. I think I only listened to it one time.
You really should, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, the one song that I do know is, I think it's called Wake Up, which is incredible. That song, every time I listen to that, I hear something new in it. It's just phenomenal.
I think that was an EP that was done between Neon Bible and the Suburbs.
The song is so good.
Or it could have been done as an EP during the time of the Suburbs itself. I forget exactly, but it is a good one. But
I love the line, "We're just a million little gods making rainstorms, turning every good thing to rust." That is an incredible line.
Yes.
And he's screaming at me, "We're just a million little gods separating us!"
Like, Ashley, are you okay?
It's so good. Oh, she's gone.
Okay. Oh, she's okay, dude. All right. Number 4 is the Beatles. Let's get it over with. My
Yeah,
list is
Beatles
lame.
are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Beatles I got into by like just one day I was watching a random clip of something like, oh my God, this is funny, absurd. What is it? Oh, it's a scene from Help. And I actually fell in love with the movies first, and then my
It's
mother
so
found out
interesting.
that I was watching the movies, like, I can't, I can totally get you into like the into the songs. And sure enough, we had like compilations left and right, and just, you know, Pilot loved the Beatles, and Pilot would talk nothing, it would just talk like no end of amazing things about it. And Pilot had this comment of like, you cannot objectively state that the Beatles weren't awesome. It's just like, it's impossible. Their contributions to pop culture and to music in general is just undeniable. It goes beyond a sort of subjective boner that like culture has for them. They are just that impactful to the music over like the last 70 years or so. I mean, I threw in too many decades there, but still, it feels that way.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah,
They're timeless.
uh, and for me, it's like there's different phases of Beatles, like the early Beatles, like the mid one, the
Oh
radio
yeah,
edition.
yeah,
They
yeah,
just
yeah.
so appealing, and it never gets old for me. So I love them to death, and I like a lot of Paul McCartney's, not a lot of it, but some of Paul McCartney's stuff afterwards as well. Number 3, because I have at least 5 or 6 T-shirts that pronounce it without fail. Pink Floyd. I love Pink Floyd. I'm more into their post Sid Barrett albums, such as Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here and whatnot. And I even like the Final Cut, which is considered the worst album because even though it was the one where like Roger Waters took over, it's still a very good album. You know, in some way or another, almost everything Pink Floyd touched turned to gold, with an exception of maybe the last 2 not lyrics albums, like Division Bell and a lot of people like Division Bell, but like A Momentary Lapse of Reason, I understand why a lot of people were kind of lukewarm about that, but just Pink Floyd, kind of like Grateful Dead, it's an entire thematic experience. You can't just listen to a single song. It's like you have to listen to the entire album, or if we're talking early Pink Floyd, you have to have been lucky enough to have captured their live sessions when they just would do psychedelic random shit. But for me, it was like the right kind of music I needed to listen to when I was in high school, and I needed something that was kind of edgier but cool and nihilistic, but at the same time like artful. It's just great. You know, I love their image, I love their themes, I like the idea that they don't try to follow like a populist kind of formula. They just do where the hell they want and they stick with it. And that kind of connects to number 2 on my list, which has pretty much been my go-to contemporary favorite over like the last 2 decades, which is Radiohead. Now that I'm considerably older, I understand that Radiohead is kind of overhyped, and not everything they do is perfect. I only just recently listened to The King of Limbs. I'm like, yeah, what the hell is this? This is kind of boring, but so many freaking albums in a row. OK Computer, Kid A, Hail to the Thief, The Bends. So many of their albums are amazing, and just dense, and just they're weird, but at the same time, like just really provocative. They know how to make things like really addictive to listen to on repeat if you want. They kind of tap into like the alternative music genre as well. It's just really, really good. And number 1, for nostalgia's sake, and because it means so much to me, it's the music I'll probably like to have played at my funeral when I die, assuming that anybody attends, would be Simon and Garfunkel. It's timeless as well. It means a lot to to my friend, to my folks. My father grew up with it, kind of passed it on to me. And I didn't never really followed like any of the music that Paul Simon or Art Garfunkel did on their own, like on separate occasions. But together they just
Oh, their magic was together. Yeah.
yeah. Paul Simon had a good career, but he wrote most of the shit. But just the memorable songs were the ones that they did together. And I love them to death. For the longest time, would think that like Bridge Over Troubled Water is like my favorite thing ever. And you know, the Boxer is great.
That's
Silence.
Oh, I love the Boxer. Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs by them for sure. I wanted to say that I almost started laughing there. I knew it was Simon and Garfunkel.
Right.
But and I think that's a wonderful number one. They're incredible. Lots and lots and lots of great music. But when you said that you want them played at your funeral, the first thing that popped into my head is you embalmed in the casket as people are standing in front of it, and over the speakers is just playing "Hello, Darkness, my friend."
Pretty much.
I've come to talk with you again, which somehow is way more funny than it is sad.
I don't think the thing is I don't think they're licensed to play Simon and Garfunkel at Disney World, but whatever.
Yeah, that's where your funeral's going to be.
And then I guess I'm going to skip to the top 5 albums. It's almost similar, but number 5, and this is just an amazing album. It's from the Moody Blues. It's Days of Future Past. Have you listened to Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues?
I've not.
It's, you know, you want to talk about listening to an album that gives you like a play in your head, or like you listen to it and it has personality and you can imagine like a movie, a little mini movie in your head from experiencing it. Days of Future Past will do that. It is an album like no other. And yeah, Props is like reacting like, dude, Punky, what the hell? Even Floydian recognizes Days of Future Past, and he'll, you know, we talk about it on occasion and like chat and stuff. It's Moody Blues does this a lot in their songs, but especially in Days of Future Past, they combine 60s rock with orchestral symphonic sound. Like they actually get an orchestra to perform like these movements, and they combine it with like this sort of rock theme, and it's like no other. You want
Beatles did that a little bit,
yeah. But Moody Blues were very good at it. And they're still performing today. My mother is going to like I think the 60th anniversary of the album, like in January or something. But Days of Future Past, if you haven't lived until you've heard Tuesday Afternoon or Nights in White Satin, just amazing orgasmic sounding like ballads. And I mean, I highly suggest it. I listen to it with Ashley, and you might have a bunch of children like next week. Okay.
That's how it works. Good music speeds up the process.
Exactly.
Gestation period.
Stop doing it to Smash Mouth. Number 4, because I had to pick one album of theirs, and in the past I would have said "Wish You Were Here," but I'm going to go with "Dark Side of the Moon" by Pink Floyd. God, if a album had a texture,
you could tell.
Yeah. But I don't know. Have you listened to Dark Side of the Moon? I feel like I'm asking you this about every album that I have on the list.
I haven't. No, I've never listened to anything.
Oh my fucking God, dude!
On purpose. On purpose, I haven't.
Why? Are you holding out till like the apocalypse or something? I mean, it's just
something like that. I want to give them the right amount of time and respect that I'm sure that their music deserves. And
okay,
even to now, I don't feel like I have done that. There's just been so many other things that I've wanted to watch or hear or do first.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that's a decent excuse, but you got to sit down, set aside about 50 minutes of your life and listen to Dark Side of the Moon, because all these albums are kind of that are my favorite. Kind of fall in that department of like it's just there's a theme to it. It feels like you listen to it A to Z, and it's an experience. It's more than just like an album, you know. And Dark Side of the Moon is like that. It has these rocking moments. It has like these orgasmic moments. It's everywhere. And the crescendo at the end is one of the best things ever when it goes to like Brain Damage into Eclipse. God, it's so gorgeous. And similar to The Wall and other albums, it kind of it breaks into itself, the ending into the beginning. There's a sense of cyclical nature to it. Just a really beautiful, beautiful, like experimental album that hit pop culture and became one of the best-selling albums of all time. And despite how popular it is, it's objectively great. It's just fantastic. And it was the album that kind of changed Pink Floyd forever. And like ever since then, they're like, oh, we got to do a theme album this time. And but I don't think anything really kind of achieves the level of singular awesomeness and Dark Side of the Moon was. The Wall is a good album, but it also has a lot of misses. That's a whole another conversation. Number 3, because they also need to have a top album, and because I still respect it. If people walked up to me and said, "What's the best contemporary album?" I usually say, "It was written in '98." Is Radiohead's "OK Computer." It just a lot of people would say that OK Computer is like the Dark Side of the Moon of the '90s, and it kind of is. It was when Radiohead established themselves as alternative rock, more so than just like a grunge band, like side puke. I guess when Radiohead first came on the scene, they were kind of in the shadow of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all the other people that were kind of borderline grunge and garbage rock. But Radiohead's like, no, we're gonna go full trippy. And with OK Computer, they made this wonderfully themed album that's both provocative with its lyrics and kind of like talks about, like, I guess you can go into a long conversation of exactly what OK Computer is about, but it has themes like Orwellian themes in it, like dystopian themes in it, idea of humanity versus technology, alienation, that kind of stuff. It's when they started becoming like a hard think group. And it was a very good time in my life when I was listening to it, when I was feeling very cheerful and optimistic, and it's just really good sounding album. Some really good stuff to rock onto. And now is the part where I'm going to surprise you, Ponky. Number 2 is Band on the Run by McCartney and Wings.
That didn't surprise me.
It didn't, really?
No, you talked to me about that lots of times.
Yeah, but no, because I thought you would expect it to be number 1. For the longest time in my life, I told myself the Band on the Run is my number 1 album.
You know what? Now that you say that, I wasn't thinking of it in those terms, but now that you say that, I have no idea what your number 1 is.
So Band on the Run was objectively speaking, it's not the best album in the world, but for me, it has major nostalgic effect. It's similar to my choice of favorite movie, which I won't go into now. But Band on the Run just has a great sound to it all around. It was like a weird fluke that it kind of hit off as well as it did. For me, I listened to it during a week that I was sick in early '98, and I was obsessed with like listening to that album and like finishing Ocarina of Time and a bunch of other weird stuff. It was a weird happy time in my moment that doesn't make sense to anybody listening on the podcast, but every time I would listen to that album afterwards, it would just be an instant endorphin rush. So it was like a song, it was like an album that just reminded me of like a moment where I was very cheerful in my life. And so if I want to relive that happy high, I would just listen to the album. That's kind of changed a bit. I mean, I'll always have that album to be nostalgic about, but I think I've gotten old enough that it's finally been dethroned by what I think will probably be my favorite album of all time, at least at the moment, and that's The Suburbs by Arcade Fire.
Wow.
Especially for this point in time in my life, because I was listening to that right when I was starting to get into like Pony Fiction and stuff, which became the impetus for meeting you and Props and Pilot and like every other fucking person in my life now. Became like the mantra of like the creative inspiration that I had, like the creative rush. I mean, I listened to a lot of stuff around that time, but like The Suburbs was like the one that really made it. And the great thing, every time I listen to that album, I find more and more things to appreciate, almost like a almost like watching Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead over and over again. There's always little things I can pick from that. And even though it's thematic, kind of like OK Computer and Dark Side of the Moon, unlike those albums, I can listen to The Suburbs in pieces, like out of order, and still appreciate it. If that makes any sense, because every song kind of feels good on, like it stands on its own, while being contributing to the whole. And the lyrics mean a lot to me. The concept of your aspirations as a youth versus the reality of being an adult, and in kind of that sense of like, if you were to meet your past self, what would you relate to them? How would you experience? How would you communicate with them? Would you tell them about your fallen hopes and dreams? Would you tell them to keep sticking to the path they're on? That's the kind of thoughts I feel evoking from that album every time I listen to it. It's like melancholic, but at the same time, kind of strangely exultant as well. And a lot of that stuff is what I channeled to End of Ponies, and a lot of the shit that I wrote in early Skirts days that kind of got me on the board. So for me, it feels like I owe that album a lot for creative juices that float around that kind of got me into this point in my life, which is a lot better than where I was in 2010 and 2009 and stuff. And so for me personally, it's a great album, and every time I listen to it, I feel mixed emotions of sorrow and triumph and positive and negative emotions and stuff. It's just, it delivers on all fronts. So you want to talk about good albums and good fucking lyrics? The Suburbs is all about that. I think my favorite song from that might be The Suburbs Part 2. Let's see. Trying to see. It's hard to remember lyrics when you're just rambling, talking to people online. But
that's what I was saying earlier. Yeah, it's funny how hard it is to grab it when your mind is buzzing.
Yeah. God, I want to pick a lyric from it. It's like and goddamn, I feel like an idiot. I'm just trying to randomly grab
No, don't.
Because
if you'd
like,
like,
here I am talking about my favorite album, and I can't just pull like a lyric out of the blue. Thank you, Google. See, here we are living in the age of information where we don't have to think. But like,
that sounds like lyrics right there.
Here we are living in the age of information where we don't even have to think.
Pretty much. But there's a line that I'm really liking, where it's they're talking about like, I'll search for your face in every passing car. It's just, the idea of like you can't reacquaint yourself with like friends and thoughts and stuff from the past, and like how like our different paths kind of divide us and sort of separate us forever. Even if we were to reunite, we don't really experience the same thing. And I don't know. I can go into it more and more and more, but I feel like an idiot trying to grab it.
No, I think that's cool. I love hearing about the parts of songs that people really grab onto.
But oh no, it's Suburban War is the name of the song. So, sorry, I want to get this fucking taken care of.
Yeah, do it. No problem.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But you started a war that we can't win. We keep erasing all the streets we grew up in. Now the music divides us into tribes. Choose your side, I'll choose mine. My old friends, I can remember when you cut your hair. I never saw you again. Now the cities we live in could be distant stars, and I search for you in every passing car. It's just really good shit that every time I hear it when I'm like, playing my iPod or something, I'm like, oh, good shit. Anyways, I've done all my lists, so you go ahead and take this center stage there.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. I liked. I think you have a lot of good choices, and you've got good taste in those fronts. My list is pretty different, and music is so hard because I think it's really impossible to pick favorites when it comes to music, because things are just so different and equally good as each other while being simultaneously incomparable. So it's very hard to say like, oh, these people are my favorite, because I like so many that are so different for so many different reasons.
Well, then just don't number them. Just say, here's 5 of them.
Yeah, I did kind of do a sort of list thing, like 5 to 1. This doesn't necessarily mean that these are my favorite artists or albums in order, but they mean a lot to me kind of in this order. If I had to, if someone held a gun to my head and made me choose which one to like give up first and never listen to again, I think that this would kind of be the order that I'd go in. So number 5 is specifically Brandon Flowers, but larger The Killers. I think that Brandon Flowers is literally one of the most genius songwriters that's alive right now, that has been alive in the last several decades. He's just incredible. I think a lot of people can listen to a Killer song and really enjoy it. There are a lot of really, really good Killer songs, both the popular ones and the ones that are less well known. But the more that you look into Brandon Flowers and his life and his writing style and the people that admire him, it's phenomenal how good he is at what he does. So I love him. I love a lot of his music, and I think probably my favorite song, or at least the song from him that really moves me every time I hear it, is All These Things That I've Done. Yeah, which Prop Master just quoted in the chat, which is an amazing song. Other really good songs on his solo album, on both of his solo albums. I think he even might have 3 now, but I'm not sure about that. Brandon Flowers' solo stuff is fantastic. I really recommend that to people who just want to hear good songwriting. You know, like that's the part of it that really gets me, is it's just brilliantly put together.
I think I've heard 2 Killer songs, Mr. Brightside and the other one.
Mr. Brightside is a good one.
They had like a big movement, I think, in 2007, 2008-ish.
Yeah, they got very popular with a couple of songs that got kind of annoying just because of how often they were played.
Right.
But if you take a while to not listen to them and then listen to them again, you realize why they became popular. They're brilliant. They're a very, very talented group of musicians. And Dustland Fairy Tale is a song that I highly recommend to people when they don't understand that the Killers are good. It was written by Brandon Flowers based on the death of his mother, and it's just phenomenal.
Ooh.
But
speaking of which, have you ever listened to Tool?
Never listened to Tool.
Okay, sometime listen to 10,000 Years in the Fire. All right, just saying.
10,000 Years in the Fire. All right, sounds deep. Number 4 is ABBA, which I already briefly talked about. I can't get rid of them. I love them. Yeah. Every time that I think that they're silly or dumb, I'll hear an ABBA song and just have the biggest smile on my face, and I'm dancing. And they're again really good songwriting. They were so smart about the way that they put together their entertainment. And there's so many ABBA songs, especially in their most popular ones. But I mean, just all over the place. ABBA has such fantastic music. In fact, let me just click on this list of ABBA songs that I have and just name maybe one of my favorites that jumps out at me.
I'm quite glad that I got to know you and like everything you're into, because way back in the day, I think I remember one of our first conversations. The only thing you mentioned was Owl City, and I'm like, oh, so things have evolved since then.
Gross, yeah. I don't even remember liking Owl City. That's funny that I said that. I love Super Trooper. That is a sort of a less well-known, like people know it, but it's far from the most popular ABBA song. There is something about that song that is just incredible. The way that they have put it together, it's so cheesy and silly. It's so like meta, because they're singing about how they're sick and tired of being famous. Okay. and they feel lonely, even though they have, facing 20,000 of your fans. How could anyone be so lonely? It's just like so silly. And then it gets to the chorus, because the idea is that this one person that is important to the singer, presumably ABBA themselves, is coming to the show that night, right? Okay. So like they feel happy and reinvigorated just because they know that one person that they know is going to be in the audience that night. And the music behind the music behind the chorus, and the way that it changes from chorus to chorus, and the things that they put in and take out, the instruments and sounds. is brilliant. The things that it makes you feel and the way that it changes the song. And I just can't get enough of listening to ABBA in general, and especially that song. My number 3.
Have I ever, sorry for interrupting you.
No, go ahead.
I can appreciate meta music on some occasion. To me, like a lot of rap music, it's too meta because like pretty much all they're talking about is like the record label and other rappers and stuff. Like, yeah, it's like comic books. Where do I begin? But did I ever talk to you about like The Wall by Pink Floyd and how it was kind of meta and stuff?
Yeah, I know quite a bit about The Wall.
Yeah,
Just I don't know if
the whole
told
point
it to me, but yeah.
The whole point of The Wall is that they're putting a wall literally between themselves and the audience because they felt so alienated from their own popularity and shit.
Right.
You know, a lot of that. I appreciate meta in fiction, and I do a lot myself, and I think it's really really cool, especially when you make it entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Done well, done meaningfully, it can be very very good. I agree with that. And ABBA in no way is trying to do it well or meaningfully, but it is a great song. I love. My third one is an album that I love a lot. Sigh No More by Mumford & Sons, which was Mumford & Sons' first album.
I've listened to that one a lot.
Yeah, it's very good. I can't say that Mumford & Sons is one of my favorite artists just because I really haven't liked what they've done recently.
Mm-hmm.
But that first album is so good. And there's so many songs on it, and just the way that the songs, the album isn't telling any story. The songs don't really go together. I don't think that there's any reason that they're in the order that they're in. But it's so fun to listen to the album in order for me because I listened to it in order over and over and over and over again when it was new to me. I actually started listening to it before they got popular because my dad kind of found them through some underground, radio network and shared that with me. So I was listening to it before a lot of my friends caught on, or before the radio grabbed it. And it's weird now because it's one of those things where I listened to it in order so many times that when I hear one of the songs, my ears are just aching for the next one to start.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
it's so frustrating when something else comes on instead. So I freaking love that. I think it was creative. I think it has very beautiful and interesting and thought-provoking lyrics, and banjos are great.
That's because I remember, I think while you're on your mission, I was asking you because again, I won't name the album, but I was listening to something a lot in your absence since you'd skedaddled, and I was like, give me more bunky flavored music. And so you suggested Sigh No More, and I went out and bought like a used disc of it or something, and I listened to that thing like crazy, and it became
it's really good.
Part of my 2013 soundtrack, and this might be a good thing, kind of a weird way, but I bought because it's a little too melancholic for me, but in a good way. The song, I think the last song of it, After the Storm.
After the Storm, incredible.
Particularly gorgeous, and I love that one. And it's became imbued into the into when I was 30, the fic that I wrote at age 30, the Rainbow Dash story. Sorry to keep bringing it back to my fan fiction, but just that the melancholic tone of that just meant a lot to me at the time. And so it's kind of cool that something that hits maybe not your top 5, but like a very poignant list of yours ended up affecting me in a way too. I felt like I kind of got the music bug in a way.
Yeah, that is cool. Well, my number 2 is the Beatles, and almost literally all of the Beatles. There are very few, if any, and certainly none that come to mind, Beatles songs that I don't like.
Okay.
And then there are so many Beatles songs that I love and listen to over and over and over. And I won't really get into it. I think that part of the beauty of the Beatles is exactly what you said, that they have all these phases. And that as people get into the Beatles and listen to them more, even if they're familiar with a lot of their songs, they're always going to find a song that surprises them and captures them and is interesting to them. And I, like Pilot, could go on and on about why the Beatles are so important and so amazing and should be loved. I won't do that right now, but yes, the Beatles are my number 2.
You have a favorite
for
album?
sure. Just incredible. No, I really truly don't. It's so hard to pick. I might have some favorite songs, but those change all the time because I'll hear one that anyway. There's just so many.
Name a few of them, you melon fuck.
Sure. One of my very favorite songs they ever did was "I'll Follow the Sun."
Yeah.
It's short.
Hey,
it's
there's a mantra for you.
I'll follow the sun.
Australia. Okay, go on.
Oh yeah! Wow, look at that. That's funny. Well, if she followed the sun, then she would just kind of go in circles. But she follows the rising sun, I suppose.
You get to book 9.
Oh, circles. I love that song. That's one of their like beautiful songs that I love. One of their really fun songs that I love is Obla Di Obla Da.
The one that Lennon hated, I believe. I think Lennon didn't like that one too much.
Maybe that's true. I think it's so much fun. It's just it's nothing but fun, which is part of the reason I like it. Help. I love the album Help, but I also just love that song. I think it's really, really, really good.
Have you seen the movie?
No, I've never seen any of their movies, and the reason is I love the music, and it's so weird to me to like. I've tried to see some of the movies, and like it's just so not what is in my head when I hear the music.
Try it again sometime.
I will.
I think Help is one of. I mean, both of them, both Help and A Hard Day's Night, are some of my favorite things ever. I couldn't care less about Magical Mystery Tour, but Help is almost like freaking. The Monty Python levels of absurdist humor, and Hard Day's Night is just a timeless classic, a beautiful black and white film that's subtle and yet just enough bizarre to constantly string you along. It's just a really good nothing film that you can watch over and over again. So I suggest you try them sometime.
Cool. Yeah, I'll give them another shot. Absolutely. I love Within You Without You. That's a really good one. I'm trying to think if there's some other ones that I have to say because there's so many. It's too hard. The more that I think about it, the more that I just love the Beatles and want to listen to them. I've just seen a face. I've just seen a face. I don't know.
That's a good one.
Well, but that one's incredible. So much fun.
Paul McCartney, For No One. You you don't remember that one do you?
No, I don't.
I'm trying to remember, because I can't sing for the life of me, but
I'll have to look it up.
You see nothing, no sign of love behind the tears, cried for no one. Years. That's a shower song for me. One of the small list of songs I'm willing to sing in the shower.
Aw, that's cute. Well, thanks for singing it.
Yeah, and half of them are songs that are about breakups, so whatever.
Their songs are really good. To me they're just too many to really nail down and say which ones are my favorite. But I definitely recommend to anybody that has not spent a lot of time with the Beatles to do so, because you're going to find something. You're going to find several songs that you like a lot and that are meaningful to you.
There's a quote I heard that if somehow we were to suffer like the apocalypse and all the information that we've collected would burn to dust, you could take the album Revolver and rebuild pop music from just that album.
That could be true. Yeah. I think they're especially. I mean, Revolver. Yeah, that is a very dynamic album with a lot of different songs on it. But if you had the whole Beatles in general, that you could all of music could be reborn. I think from that people would be inspired to do every genre again, and that's pretty amazing. And then my number one, which we've been teasing and which a lot of people already know, my favorite, Coldplay. I love Coldplay in a very deep way that I think goes beyond the way that a lot of people feel about a lot of bands that are similarly popular. I've spent a lot of time with Coldplay, so it just feels more meaningful to me than a lot of other artists. Even though they're very popular and a lot of people like them, I have this very personal and very long-standing relationship with them that makes it hard to just imagine to put them in a group of like other popular bands that are similar to them these days. And my favorite album of theirs is Milo Xyloto, which is incredible. It's the one that we talked about earlier, that every time I listen to it, I see this stage performance of this very particular story that is definitely in the album and was written into it, of this dystopian world where a character named Milo has this is introduced to this world of discovery through these rebels who are rebelling against a major minus, and it's very colorless, very drab regime, and just an amazing album, easy to listen to over and over and over again. You hear new things every time. To me personally, it's very important to the way that I hear music and to the way that I think of music as telling stories. I love so many of the songs for lots of different reasons. I think, again, it has a lot of different genres and does a good job of balancing them. And for a ton of reasons, Milo Xyloto is my all-time favorite album, and probably always will be. At least part of me will always hold that album as my favorite, just because of how important it was when I was listening to it over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like me and Band on the Run, kinda. I think it's more important to you than Band on the Run was to me, because it sounds like it. You have a. I had a creative vision in my head whenever I would listen to Band on the Run, but it wasn't nearly as cool as yours. I'll say that much.
Well, thanks. I do love that story, and I hope that one day I tried to write it in pony form, and I still would like to finish that. But one day I would really like, one way or another, even if it's just a silly YouTube series, I would love to bring that to life somehow. But other albums that are very good, I think. Okay, here's the thing. I don't like that the album Viva La Vida included the term Viva La Vida. The full name of the album is Viva La Vida and Death and All of His Friends, which I think should have been the name of the album. I think that it should be Death and All of His Friends, because that's what the album is about. That's one of the best songs on it. The album's really long. It has a whole extension that goes on to the end called Prospects March that was left off of the commercial version, but it should definitely be listened to. It has some amazing songs like Glass of Water and Now My Feet Don't Touch the Ground. And that whole album is an amazing experience that I love a lot, and I think people should give a full listen to, because, again, the actual song Viva La Vida was way overplayed. And even though it's a good song, it's very annoying because of how popular it was. And so when you get past that and you're able to listen to things like Violet Hill and 42, gosh, that album is just incredible. So even though Milo Xyloto is the most meaningful to me, I actually think Death and All of His Friends might be their best, just because it has so many iconic songs and it goes through such an amazing range.
I've listened to Parachutes and A Rush of Blood to the Head.
Both very good. Parachutes is great, but again, they were finding their footing. So they have a couple of incredible songs. Yellow, obviously.
And it was all yellow.
Yeah, Yellow's really good. Shiver is really good. Warning Sign. That might be on a later album, actually.
Warning Sign.
But anyway, very, very, very good.
Might be Rush of Blood to the Head. Warning Sign.
Yeah, I think so.
Clocks, that's the one everyone's heard, right?
Yes,
yeah.
that's one from later.
That was from Rush of Blood to the Head, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And The Scientist.
Yeah, The Scientist is great. But, oh yeah, Don't Panic. Fourth's just mentioned Don't Panic, which is, I think, the last song on their first album, Parachutes, which is so good. I think Coldplay's very good, very fun. They've gone through a lot of different things, and so again, Obviously, they don't have the same. They're not as good or as important as the Beatles.
Yeah.
But I feel like if people give Coldplay a chance and listen to a lot of their repertoire. What's the word that's not repertoire that sounds like repertoire? Oh boy. I guess, yeah. Whatever it is. People can find a good Coldplay song, you know, something that they like in Coldplay's music, even if they say they don't like Coldplay.
My deal with Coldplay is that they sound awesome. They have an amazing sound. Chris Martin, right? That's his name. Great singer, great voice. I fucking hate their lyrics. It's no offense.
Well, why is that?
Just maybe not so much Milo Xyloto, but like the stuff beforehand. I just, like, especially Rush of Blood to the Head. Like I feel like the first time I listened to them, I could predict like what the rhyming line is going to be. I just never found the lyrics to be very provocative. And of course, I'm a weirdo coming from like Radiohead, where like the lyrics almost mean nothing. So
yeah, that's interesting, because I was going to say I feel a very similar thing about Radiohead, and I know that there is a big, or there was a big sort of Radiohead versus Coldplay thing, that like you can't like one and the other. And I think that
when Coldplay first started, they kind of sounded like OK Computer. Like they kind of had the mid-age Radiohead sound, but Radiohead has done so many things all across the board that I think Coldplay just became Coldplay, and it took time for people to recognize that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't like Radiohead, and I haven't listened to them much, but yeah, I think that Coldplay's lyrics are very particular, and I love them because they do make me see things and think of things and consider what the meaning is. And I think that I like to do that. I like to be encouraged to imagine what the lyrics might be, versus listening to something that just has nonsensical lyrics that are so out there that I can't even form an image in my head. You know, that's not fun.
And then when they interviewed like Tom York about it, it's like, fuck off. It's like, yeah, what a douchebag.
Yeah, he is the worst. I don't like Radiohead at all. I really don't like anything about them.
They stand for some good things on principle, but they have kind of douchebag all over them. And I've never been to any of their live tours. I don't really want to be, but I still like their albums just because I do.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think that that's one of the best things about music, especially now, is that there are so many musicians making so much music that there's really no reason to spend time hating anything.
Yeah.
Because you can go find something that you like.
Yeah.
And that to me is really, really amazing, and a great part about the world and the time that we live in.
Honorable mentions, good albums that didn't make a top list. Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication. That's a good damn album. Since I Left You by Avalanches, fucking amazing album. Even like one of only 2 albums that we released in like 15 years. Plans by Death Cab for Cutie, really good.
Oh yeah, I love Death Cab for Cutie.
The Invisible Band by Travis. That was music that got me past the 9/11 period. Merriweather Post Pavilion by Animal Collective. It's just rich syrup for the ears. There's so much stuff out there, you know.
Yeah, I didn't really do a honorable mention.
I just thought of it.
Yeah, I do love. I love the album "Aim and Ignite" by Fun.
Oh yeah,
I think that whole album together is really amazing. I really, as a musician, not necessarily any particular song. In fact, this one's really weird because a lot of things about this person's bands and the music that they make I don't like, but I think that he is an incredible musician with a very good voice. Is Jason Lancaster, who was half of Mayday Parade and then later the lead of I think it's called Go Radio was his.
Okay.
Anyway, he's got an incredible voice that I've definitely used to try to sound better myself. So,
how about bands that you don't like?
I don't want to get into that. I could go on
Not
and
that
on and on.
not that you hate them, you just don't like them. I'll go. I don't like Queen.
Oh, that's too bad.
I don't. I think they're talented. I think they're amazing, but I feel like they're overplayed, and I almost never in a mood to listen to Queen, and it's like same thing about Kiss. I fucking hate Kiss. Just no.
Yeah, I don't really know those. I don't like rock. I understand that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Like harder rock, you know, kind of even modern rock.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. It's never been the kind of music that really interests me, or I don't like guitar solos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like there's a lot of things in that brand of music that just is not, it doesn't make me feel anything except annoyed.
I kind of understand that feeling, and then one day I sat down, I listened to the Black Album full from Metallica. I'm like, this is objectively really fucking good, even if I'm not into it. This is a good album.
And I even have friends who are very talented guitar players and who have shown me a lot of albums and a lot of songs that are absolutely amazing, but I cannot feel much when I listen to them, even though I can hear that they're very good. And I listen to music to feel. And again, there's so much music out there that, you know, why waste time personally with music that you don't love when you can be finding something that you do love or enjoying something that you love again. So that's kind of how I feel about music.
Earlier I told you to check out because you said you're not into hard rock. Earlier I told you to check out Tool's 10,000 Years in the Fire.
Yeah.
Because the reason I heard about them was from listening to Game Grumps. Maybe you've heard about it. Danny and Aaron were having a conversation.
Absolutely, yeah.
It reference to Wings for Marie, which is a song from the middle of that, which has the line 10,000 Years into Fire. And forgive my idiocy, but you had mentioned a song that someone had written about, like their family member who passed away or something.
Yes.
And Tool did the same thing. Tool is like a notoriously atheist group of like writers and musicians, I believe. But like the lead singer's or lead writer's mother was a devout Catholic, and she had like fibromyalgia or some sort of horrible arthritic disease that like fucked her over in like the last years of her life. And she ended up passing away. And so the her son, the songwriter, felt kind of obligated or tasked with having to make a song as a ballad for her, as like a dirge in respect of her and her belief, even though he himself was not Christian or religious. So he wrote a song called Wings for Marie, and it's an amazing fucking song. 10,000 Years in the Fire refers to the years that she lived with like this debilitating arthritic condition, and he's basically singing more or less from her perspective about how she's like 10,000 years in the fire is enough. It's time for her to go home to heaven, and she's like singing, go into the pearly gates and say, you know, it's my time now, give me my wings, St. Peter, I've earned it, you know. And it's done in this sort of gradual upbuilding metal song, but it's not death metal, it's not obnoxious, it's just really from the heart with like this heavy bass chord. So, you know, you give heavy metal a try because there's some good shit out there.
Yeah, I like to, I believe that in every genre, even genres that I don't like, there is art and there is passion and there are songs that I would appreciate. It's hard to find because, again, the same thing that I'm talking about, that there's so much. But yeah, I do like recommendations, and I'll check that one out. And I think with that we should probably all go to bed, or at least head out to do other things. I know that Ash is coming home, and it looks like a lot of people are dropping out.
Yeah, it came back. It started at about 8, and then it came back to going up to like 17, and now it's back to 9.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for joining in. It's fun to talk about this kind of stuff. It's fun to remember why I like music and the things that I love about music. So, and thank you, Skirts. Thanks for sharing all of your interesting viewpoints and histories with us.
I go to hell.